"Can you tell Santa Claus to give me a house?" the boy asked the millionaire, and his expression changed. It was a cold December afternoon, and the air in the small, worn-down neighborhood of Brooksville was sharp with winter's bite. The streets, lined with houses that had seen better days, seemed almost forgotten by the world outside. These were homes that stood as silent witnesses to the struggles of families that had long since given up on waiting for better days to come. Yet despite the grayness of their surroundings, there was still a flicker of hope in the eyes of the people who lived here, especially in the heart of one young boy. His name was Charlie, a boy with a wild imagination and a heart full of dreams. At 11 years old, he had already seen enough hardship to make most adults feel defeated, but instead of feeling sorry for himself, Charlie held on to something few others could: hope. He wasn't just hoping for little things like toys or candy. No, Charlie wanted something that seemed impossible, something his family desperately needed: a real home, a place where his mom, his little sister, and he could be safe, comfortable, and secure. His family's house was falling apart. The roof leaked when it rained, the walls were cracked, and the floors creaked like they might give way at any moment. Charlie's mom, who worked 2 jobs, couldn't afford the repairs, and Charlie understood that. She never complained, though. She always smiled, trying her best to make sure they didn't feel the weight of their situation too heavily. But Charlie could see it in her eyes: the tiredness, the worry, the constant strain. She was doing everything she could, but the dream of a better life seemed so far away. That afternoon, Charlie was at the annual charity event that Mr. Harris, the local millionaire, hosted for the people of Brooksville. Every year, Mr. Harris would throw a big party and give out donations to the less fortunate families, helping them get through the holiday season. It was the one time of year that the community felt like they mattered, that they weren't invisible. Charlie's mom didn't want to go this year. She was too tired, but Charlie convinced her. He'd seen flyers for the event around the neighborhood and knew that it would be an opportunity to at least enjoy some warm food and a little holiday cheer. Charlie's eyes sparkled as he walked through the event, taking in the music, the decorations, and the brightly lit Christmas tree at the center of the hall. It was everything he had imagined Christmas could be like. But what caught his attention the most was Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris was a tall, broad-shouldered man who seemed larger than life, someone who had everything that Charlie could only dream of. The community knew him as a successful businessman who owned half the town. His wealth was the stuff of legends, but there was one thing that Charlie had always wondered: what kind of man would be so rich and yet still want to help people like them? Charlie had heard that Mr. Harris wasn't just about giving money. He actually took the time to learn about the families he helped. Some said he even remembered their names from one year to the next, though Charlie wasn't sure if that was true. The crowd parted for a moment, and there stood Mr. Harris, speaking with a few local leaders, his deep voice carrying over the sounds of the event. His expensive suit looked out of place in a room full of people wearing second-hand clothes, but there was something about him that made Charlie want to talk to him. As the evening wore on, Charlie found himself standing by the refreshment table, nervously watching Mr. Harris from across the room. He had made up his mind. He had to talk to him. Maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to ask for the one thing that would change everything. He wasn't sure what would happen, but he knew that asking might be the only way to get what he truly wanted. Taking a deep breath, Charlie pushed his way through the crowd. His heart raced in his chest as he approached Mr. Harris. The man was in the middle of a conversation with someone else when Charlie stood next to him. For a moment, he felt out of place, small, insignificant, like he didn't belong there. But Mr. Harris looked down, noticing the boy standing beside him, and gave a warm, friendly smile. "Hey there, young man," Mr. Harris said, his voice deep and smooth. "You enjoying the party?" Charlie nodded, feeling his nervousness growing. He had planned what he wanted to say, but now that the moment had arrived, the words seemed to escape him. He shifted on his feet, trying to gather his courage. I'm okay," Charlie finally stammered, looking up at the older man. I wanted to ask you something." Mr. Harris raised an eyebrow. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Charlie took another deep breath. He looked into Mr. Harris's eyes, trying to make himself heard. "Can you tell Santa Claus to give me a house?" he asked, his voice quiet but filled with determination. For a moment, Mr. Harris blinked, his expression unreadable. It wasn't the request he had expected to hear from a child, not a request for toys or video games or even clothes. Instead, it was a request for something that most people couldn't even dream of, something so simple, yet so beyond reach for the boy and his family. Mr. Harris laughed lightly, almost out of reflex, but as he saw the sincerity in Charlie's eyes, his smile faded. The laughter died in his throat, replaced by something far more thoughtful. He knelt down so he was at eye level with Charlie, studying the boy carefully. "A house, huh?" Mr. Harris asked gently, though the words felt heavier now, laced with a sense of realization that made the request seem all the more important. "Well, I'll tell you what. I can't promise you that Santa will deliver one, but I'll see what I can do." Charlie's eyes widened. "Really?" he asked, not fully believing it yet unsure if he was hearing things right. Mr. Harris smiled again, this time with a deeper understanding. "Really?" he said softly. "Now go enjoy the rest of the party, okay?" Charlie, still in shock, nodded eagerly and quickly ran off, his heart fluttering with hope. He had done it. He had asked, and though he wasn't sure what would come of it, there was a spark of possibility that he hadn't felt in a long time. As Mr. Harris watched the boy disappear into the crowd, his mind raced. He had seen many requests come his way before, usually from adults asking for donations to charity or organizations looking for a handout. But this was different. This boy wasn't asking for toys or entertainment. He was asking for something that in his world was as basic as breathing, a home, a roof over his head, a safe place for his family to live. Mr. Harris felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. It was a strange combination of guilt and determination. How could he be sitting on so much wealth, with all his luxuries, when children like Charlie were living in conditions that were barely livable? How could he ignore a request like this? The question lingered in Mr. Harris's mind long after the event had ended, and as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the image of Charlie's hopeful face. Something had to change. The days after the charity event felt different to Mr. Harris. For years, he had built a life surrounded by luxury, an empire, really. He owned the largest businesses in Brooksville and had invested in everything from real estate to tech companies. His wealth, his power, seemed limitless. But as the days passed after his brief interaction with Charlie, something inside him began to shift. At first, Mr. Harris thought he would forget about the boy and his innocent request. After all, it was just one of those moments, a fleeting encounter, a child's wish that would fade into the background like so many others. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Charlie's hopeful expression, his wide, trusting eyes that seemed to silently ask for something more than just a house. It was as if the boy was asking for a change in how the world worked, how people like Mr. Harris lived, and how people like Charlie had to survive. Mr. Harris had been raised in wealth, his every need met without question. He'd never had to wonder where his next meal would come from or whether he'd be able to sleep safely under a roof. In his world, houses were just things, properties that could be bought and sold, investments that appreciated in value. But for Charlie and so many others in his neighborhood, a house meant security. It meant not being cold during the winter, not worrying about leaks when it rained, and not wondering if tomorrow would be the day the walls finally caved in. In the days following the event, Mr. Harris began to see his wealth through a new lens. He had always believed in giving to charity, of course. Every year, he made substantial donations to various organizations, but those donations were often impersonal. He never saw where his money went or who it helped. It was easy to write a check to pat himself on the back and feel good about his generosity. But this was different. Charlie's request wasn't for a handout. It was for a real solution, for a lasting change. As Mr. Harris sat in his office the day after the event, the thoughts swirling in his head became louder. He knew that, like most wealthy people, he had been blind to the realities of life for those less fortunate. He had heard about the struggles of the community, but hearing about it was one thing. Actually seeing it up close, hearing it from someone so young, was something else entirely. The boy had shown him a truth that couldn't be ignored. Wealth wasn't about owning more or building bigger. It was about using what you had to make a real difference. That evening, after a long day of meetings, Mr. Harris went home to his mansion on the hill, a stark contrast to the cramped, dilapidated houses in Brooksville. His mansion had every luxury imaginable: marble floors, grand chandeliers, heated pools, and sprawling gardens that stretched for miles. He had everything, except for peace of mind. As he wandered through the grand halls of his home, Mr. Harris thought about his own childhood. Growing up, he had everything he needed, but something was missing. His parents were distant, more focused on business deals than on family. His upbringing was filled with nannies, tutors, and private schools, but little real love. Even now, as an adult, he had friends in high places and all the comforts he could ask for, but he still felt something lacking, a deep sense of fulfillment that money couldn't provide. He sat at his desk, looking at the letterhead of the charity event and the scribbled note he had written that night after meeting Charlie. It read, "What is the real meaning of giving?" The question hung in the air like an unanswered prayer. He had always given, but had he ever truly understood the impact of what he was doing? Did he know what it felt like to live in fear of losing everything, to not have a place to call home? No, he didn't. And the more he thought about it, the more it gnawed at him. His team at work was pushing him to focus on the upcoming merger. There were deals to be made, acquisitions to finalize, but none of it mattered as much anymore. What was the point of all his wealth if he couldn't use it to make a meaningful difference in the world? He had a responsibility to do more than just write checks. He could do something real. Mr. Harris spent the next few days visiting the community in Brooksville. At first, he told his team he was scouting new properties for potential investments, but the truth was, he wanted to see things with his own eyes. He wanted to witness the lives of the people Charlie represented. He wanted to understand what it felt like to live in their shoes. He walked the streets of Brooksville, past crumbling buildings and graffiti-covered walls, until he found himself standing in front of Charlie's house. It wasn't much. Just a small, two-story structure that seemed to lean against the next house like it might collapse any minute. The roof sagged, and the windows were cracked. As Mr. Harris stood there taking it all in, the reality of the situation hit him hard. This wasn't just a house. It was a symbol of everything that was wrong in the world, a place where a family's dreams went to die before they even had a chance to grow. Charlie's mom, a woman in her mid-30s, was outside hanging laundry when Mr. Harris approached. She didn't recognize him at first, but when he introduced himself, her eyes widened in surprise. She had heard of Mr. Harris, of course, but she never imagined he would ever come to their neighborhood, let alone their doorstep. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked politely, though her voice held a note of suspicion. People like Mr. Harris didn't just show up to small neighborhoods like theirs. They didn't care about people like them. "I was just walking around, Mr. Harris said, trying to sound casual, though he could feel the weight of his words. "I wanted to see for myself what this neighborhood was really like." Charlie's mom looked at him for a long moment before nodding. "I suppose you've heard all the stories about how we're struggling here," she said, her voice soft but carrying a sharp edge. She didn't mean to be rude, but years of hard living had taught her to be cautious. People who came to their community usually had an agenda. "I have," Mr. Harris said, "but I wanted to see for myself. This neighborhood, it needs more than charity. It needs change." For a moment, there was silence between them. Charlie's mom seemed to be measuring him up, deciding whether he was just another wealthy man with empty promises or someone who genuinely cared. Finally, she nodded again, a small, guarded smile appearing on her lips. "Well, if you really want to help, there's a lot to do here. But don't expect it to be easy." Mr. Harris smiled back, a newfound determination in his heart. "I don't mind hard work. I'm ready to do whatever it takes." As he left the house, Mr. Harris felt something stirring within him. It wasn't just about giving money or charity anymore. It was about taking action, about creating something that would last. He couldn't promise he would solve all the problems of Brooksville, but he could start with something simple, something tangible. Charlie's wish had changed him. Now it was time to make that change real. The following days after his visit to Charlie's home felt like a turning point for Mr. Harris. The weight of his new resolve pressed down on him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he had to do something more, something substantial. Back at his mansion, the usual routine seemed unimportant. The phone calls, the meetings, and the high-stakes business deals no longer held the same allure they once had. He had spent so many years building an empire, but as he sat in his office, overlooking the town of Brooksville in the distance, he realized that he had been building the wrong kind of empire, one that had isolated him from the very people he could help. The world he had spent so much time and energy cultivating was a world where the wealthy thrived, while people like Charlie and his family struggled to survive. Mr. Harris began to consider what real change looked like. Charity was one thing, but it wasn't enough. Writing a check to a cause was easy. It was convenient. But how many of those donations actually helped improve the lives of people who needed it most? How many of those charities truly created long-term solutions for poverty, housing, and education? In all his years of giving, he hadn't once stopped to consider the deeper implications of his generosity. Was it just a way to ease his conscience, or was it actually making a difference? He thought back to his visit to Charlie's neighborhood. He could still hear the crackling sound of the boy's mother's voice when she told him, "If you really want to help, there's a lot to do here." The words had stayed with him. She wasn't asking for a quick fix. She wasn't asking for something temporary. She was asking for real change, something sustainable that could lift her family and her community from the cycle of poverty they had been trapped in for so long. And that, he realized, was what he had to do. As he sat in his office, Mr. Harris picked up the phone. He dialed the number of his most trusted advisor, someone who had been by his side for years. When the line clicked and the voice on the other end answered, Mr. Harris didn't waste any time. "I need you to set up a meeting with city officials in Brooksville," he said. "And I want to get some of the best architects, planners, and developers on board. We're going to do something about housing there, not just temporary housing, real, affordable homes." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line before his advisor spoke. "Mr. Harris, I'm not sure I understand. You want to build houses in Brooksville? That's a significant undertaking. It's going to be costly, and I don't care about the cost," Mr. Harris cut in. "I care about making a difference. We can't just keep throwing money at charities. We need to address the root cause. Housing is where we start." The decision was made. Within hours, Mr. Harris had assembled a team of architects, urban planners, and real estate experts to begin work on what he was now calling the Brooksville Project. The idea was simple: build safe, affordable homes for the families in the community. But it wasn't just about building houses. It was about creating a community where people could thrive. Mr. Harris wanted to go beyond just putting up buildings. He wanted to create a space where families could grow, where children like Charlie could play without fear of the roof falling in on them. The project began slowly, as all major undertakings do. But as the planning progressed, Mr. Harris's vision became clearer. This wasn't just about constructing buildings. It was about giving people dignity, a sense of security. It was about giving children like Charlie the opportunity to dream without having to constantly worry about whether or not they would have a home to come back to each night. As the architects worked, Mr. Harris spent more time in Brooksville, getting to know the families in the area. He spoke with parents, teachers, and local business owners. He asked them about their struggles, their hopes, and what they needed to move forward. It was eye-opening. For so long, he had viewed the community from the outside, as an outsider, making assumptions about what people needed. But now, he was listening. He was hearing their stories, stories of people who had worked hard their entire lives but still couldn't get ahead. Stories of people who had been let down by the system, by politicians, by those who had the power to help but never did. Charlie's family became an integral part of the project. Mr. Harris visited them regularly, and Charlie's mom offered valuable insights into what would make the neighborhood truly livable. She wasn't interested in flashy amenities or luxuries. She wanted simple things: safe streets, clean water, and the chance to provide her children with the education they deserved. For Charlie, the prospect of a new home felt like a dream come true. Every time he visited the construction site with Mr. Harris, his eyes would widen with excitement as he saw the progress being made. One afternoon, as the project started to take shape, Charlie and his mom invited Mr. Harris over for dinner. It wasn't much, just a simple meal of rice and beans, but it was a gesture that meant more than words could express. Sitting in their modest kitchen, Mr. Harris felt something stir inside him, something that had been missing for years. It was a feeling of connection, of being part of something bigger than himself. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was truly making a difference. As the months passed, the project began to take on a life of its own. The local community, once skeptical of Mr. Harris's intentions, started to rally around the idea. People who had once been distrustful of a wealthy outsider now saw him as a partner. The work crews were made up of locals, giving them jobs and a sense of ownership in the project. The more Mr. Harris listened and engaged with the people of Brooksville, the more he realized that this wasn't just about building houses. It was about building a community. Then came the moment when the first homes were completed. It was a chilly morning, and Mr. Harris stood at the entrance of one of the newly finished houses. He had promised Charlie and his family that they would be among the first to move in, and today, that promise was finally being fulfilled. As Charlie and his mom stood beside him, their eyes wide with disbelief, Mr. Harris handed them the key to their new home. "This is yours," Mr. Harris said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "It's a place where you can feel safe, where you can build your future." Charlie's mom wiped away a tear, her voice cracking as she spoke. "I never thought this day would come. Thank you. Thank you so much." Charlie, unable to put his feelings into words, simply hugged Mr. Harris. It was a hug full of gratitude and wonder, a hug that spoke volumes about how much this new home meant to them. As Mr. Harris stood there, watching the boy and his mother walk into their new home, he felt a sense of fulfillment that no business deal or investment had ever given him. He had done more than just give away money. He had given them a future. And in return, he had received something priceless, a deep, lasting sense of purpose. Months had passed since the groundbreaking ceremony, and the first homes were finally complete. The project that had started as an idea, an innocent wish from a young boy, was now a reality. The air in Brooksville was filled with anticipation. The community that had once felt abandoned and forgotten was now on the brink of transformation. Mr. Harris couldn't have been prouder of the work done so far. The homes were built with care, designed to be both functional and welcoming, with small front yards, sturdy roofs, and large windows that let in the warmth of the sun. But it wasn't just about the homes themselves. It was about the sense of ownership, the sense of pride that the families would feel when they finally stepped inside. These weren't just houses, they were symbols of hope, of a new beginning. But there was still much to be done. The next phase of the project was to ensure that the neighborhood continued to thrive. This meant not only providing homes, but also ensuring that the families had access to quality education, healthcare, and jobs. Mr. Harris knew that without these critical elements, the homes would be little more than empty shells. He had promised to help, and now it was time to make good on that promise. It was a chilly Saturday morning when Mr. Harris arrived at the site for the grand reveal. The final homes were ready, and it was time for the families to see their new houses. He was joined by a small group of local officials, construction workers, and volunteers, people who had helped make this dream come true. The crowd gathered at the entrance of the first house, and Mr. Harris felt his heart race in anticipation. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Charlie and his mother were among the first to arrive, their faces beaming with excitement. Charlie, now 11, was a little older than the boy who had first made that simple request months ago, but his wide-eyed wonder hadn't changed. He looked up at Mr. Harris with a smile that seemed to light up the entire neighborhood. "Mr. Harris, I can't believe it," Charlie said, his voice filled with awe. "Is this really our house?" Mr. Harris smiled back, feeling a lump form in his throat. "It is, Charlie. It's all yours." Charlie's mom, standing next to him, wiped away a tear as she clutched the key to their new home. "This is more than we could have ever dreamed of," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We never thought anyone would care enough to help us." The crowd around them applauded, and Charlie's mom gave Mr. Harris a grateful hug. The connection between them was more than just that of a philanthropist and a recipient of charity. It was a bond built on trust, on shared humanity. Charlie's family wasn't the only one who had been given a chance for a better future. Every family who had moved into the neighborhood was given that same chance. As the day wore on, more families arrived, each one eager to see their new homes. The grand reveal was full of laughter, cheers, and even a few tears. Some families had never owned a home before, and for them, this day was a dream come true. It was more than just a physical structure. It was a place where they could build memories, where they could finally feel safe and secure. Mr. Harris moved through the crowd, shaking hands and talking to families, asking them about their new homes and how they felt. He had never felt more alive, more connected to the people he was helping. There was no sense of superiority here, no sense of giving from above. Instead, he felt like a partner, a friend. And in return, the community embraced him, not as a wealthy outsider but as someone who had made a real difference in their lives. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood, Mr. Harris stood back and watched as the families settled into their new homes. He saw children running through the streets, laughing and playing. He saw parents standing on their porches, looking out over the neighborhood with pride. For the first time in his life, Mr. Harris felt like he had truly contributed to something worthwhile. It was then that Charlie approached him again, his face alight with excitement. He pulled Mr. Harris aside, away from the crowd. "Mr. Harris, I don't know how to thank you," Charlie said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You've changed everything for us. I don't even know how to explain it. It's like a dream come true." Mr. Harris smiled down at him. "Charlie, you don't need to thank me. You were the one who made this happen. Your request, your simple wish, it's what started all of this." Charlie looked up at him, confused for a moment. "My wish? But you're the one who made it all real." Mr. Harris knelt down to Charlie's level, looking into his eyes with deep sincerity. "It wasn't just about the house. It was about the fact that you asked for something real, something that mattered. You showed me what was missing in my own life. You reminded me that giving isn't about money or things. It's about making a real difference in people's lives." Charlie's face softened, and for a moment they stood there in silence, a deep understanding passing between them. The boy had asked for a house, and in doing so, he had brought a change not only to his own life but to the entire community. As Mr. Harris watched the families in the neighborhood, his mind drifted back to the early days of the project. At first, it had seemed like an impossible task, a dream that couldn't possibly be realized. But now, standing in the heart of this new community, he saw that it was more than possible. It was happening, and he had been a part of it, but the work wasn't finished yet. There was still so much more to be done. The homes were just the beginning. Now it was time to build something that would last, a community that would thrive for generations to come. Mr. Harris had already started talks with local schools, hospitals, and businesses to ensure that the families of Brooksville would have access to the resources they needed to succeed. Education, healthcare, employment, all of these things were vital to making sure the neighborhood didn't just survive but flourished. As the evening wore on, Mr. Harris felt a sense of peace he had never known before. This was the kind of legacy he wanted to leave, a legacy of lasting change, a legacy that would outlive him. Charlie's words echoed in his mind. "You've changed everything for us." And in a way, Charlie had done just that, not just for his family but for the entire community. In return, Mr. Harris had given them more than just a house. He had given them hope, a belief that their lives could be different, that they could rise above their circumstances. And that, he realized, was the greatest gift he could ever give. As the night fell and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Mr. Harris looked around at the new homes, the new community, and felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had set out to change one life, but in doing so, he had changed many. And that was a change that would last forever. The days after the grand reveal were a whirlwind of activity, but for Mr. Harris, it felt like something more. A deep sense of fulfillment that he had never experienced before. Each new home built, each family who moved in, and each moment of laughter shared between neighbors seemed to reinforce the truth he had learned in the hardest way. Real change came from commitment, not charity. He had given these people more than houses. He had given them the opportunity to build a future. But it wasn't enough to simply give them homes. The real work, the hard work, was ensuring that those homes would be filled with hope, growth, and possibilities. As he continued to visit the community, Mr. Harris realized that Brooksville wasn't just a place that needed housing. It needed education, healthcare, employment, and social infrastructure that would give its people the tools they needed to succeed. With each visit, Mr. Harris spent time talking to local leaders, parents, and children. He learned that access to quality education was one of the biggest challenges facing the community. Many of the children had attended overcrowded schools with underfunded programs, and the dropout rate was high. It was clear that if he wanted to see a lasting transformation in Brooksville, he needed to invest in the future of the children. He partnered with local schools to bring in new resources, better teachers, improved facilities, and after-school programs that would help students keep up with their studies. He also worked with local businesses to create job opportunities for the adults in the community, encouraging them to hire from within Brooksville. It wasn't just about providing financial assistance. It was about creating a cycle of empowerment, where each person had the tools to build a better life. As the months went by, the changes in the neighborhood became more and more evident. Children who had once struggled to keep up in school began to show improvements. Parents, once resigned to working low-wage jobs, found opportunities to build careers. Families who had once lived in fear of eviction now walked down the street with their heads held high, proud of what they had achieved. For Charlie and his family, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. His mother, who had spent years working multiple jobs just to keep food on the table, was now able to work from home, offering daycare services to other families in the neighborhood. It wasn't a fortune, but it allowed her the time to be present for her children, something she had never been able to do before. She was also able to volunteer at the local community center, helping other parents find employment opportunities. Charlie, now in middle school, had grown into a confident young boy. He no longer had to worry about where his next meal would come from or whether he would have a safe place to sleep at night. His grades had improved, and he had started dreaming about going to college, something that had seemed impossible just a year before. He still remembered the day he made his wish to Mr. Harris, and every time he walked past his house, he couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for that moment. One evening, after finishing his homework, Charlie went outside to sit on the front steps of their new home. It was a clear night, and the stars twinkled overhead, just as they had on that cold December night when Mr. Harris had promised to do something about the state of their lives. Charlie looked up at the sky, his thoughts drifting to all that had happened in the past year. The change had been so fast, so overwhelming, that sometimes it still felt like a dream. As he sat there, Mr. Harris pulled up in his car, as he often did on evenings like this. He got out and walked over to where Charlie sat, a warm smile on his face. "You look like you're deep in thought, Charlie," Mr. Harris said, sitting down beside him. Charlie smiled. "I was just thinking about how much has changed. I can't even remember what it was like to live in the old house. It feels like another lifetime." "It wasn't that long ago, was it?" Mr. Harris said softly. "But that's the beauty of change, isn't it? It doesn't have to take a lifetime to make a difference. It only takes the right moment, the right people, and a little bit of effort." Charlie nodded. "You gave us that moment, Mr. Harris. You made it real. I don't think I could ever thank you enough." "You've already thanked me, Charlie," Mr. Harris said, looking out at the neighborhood. "By doing what you're doing, by being the person you are, you've shown me that this was all worth it." Charlie looked up at him, his eyes full of curiosity. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Mr. Harris said, turning to face him, "that this isn't just about me helping you. You've helped me too. You and your family, you've shown me what it means to really make a difference. It's not about giving money, it's about making a real connection. You taught me that." Charlie grinned. "I guess I didn't know I was teaching you anything, but I'm glad you came. You've changed everything for us. I didn't even know what a future looked like until now." Mr. Harris smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "That's exactly what I hoped for, a future, and now you have one. So do all the families in this neighborhood." As they sat there together, looking out at the quiet, peaceful street that was now full of hope, Mr. Harris felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had done more than he had ever imagined. He had taken the simple wish of a young boy and turned it into something real, a new community, a fresh start, a brighter future for all the people who had once been forgotten. And in the process, he had rediscovered a truth about giving that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. But the work wasn't finished. There would always be more to do, more families to help, more opportunities to create. The world wasn't perfect, but Brooksville had become a place where change was possible, where people could believe in a better tomorrow. Mr. Harris's thoughts drifted back to his own life, his childhood, his success, his journey. For the first time, he realized that all the wealth and success in the world meant nothing if you didn't use it to help others. The things he had once considered important, the business deals, the mergers, the investments, now seemed trivial. It wasn't about how much money he had or how many companies he owned. It was about making a difference in people's lives. And now, Brooksville was proof that one person, one simple wish could change the world. As he stood up to leave, Mr. Harris placed his hand on Charlie's shoulder. "You're going to do great things, Charlie. You already are." Charlie smiled up at him. "Thanks, Mr. Harris. You gave me a chance to believe in myself." And with that, Mr. Harris walked back to his car, a sense of purpose filling him, knowing that the legacy he had built wasn't about buildings or wealth. It was about people and the impact they could have on one another's lives. As he drove away, the streets of Brooksville seemed brighter, filled with hope. The future, for the first time in a long time, felt full of endless possibilities.